There are things in life that happen that challenge us, that test our faith, things that are hard, things that are uncertain, maybe fears, worries, doubts, frustrations, whatever the case may be. And right now, even in our own country and even in the world all over, there are many things that are going on that we are not sure about what's going to happen next. How are these things going to go? We can think about all the, what ifs. What if this happens? What if this falls apart? What if, the world just goes crazy or crazier than it already is? And so there are things like that, whether in our own country or whether in other parts of the world, things that are happening that can cause us to fear, to worry, to be scared, and we wonder, why. We wonder what's next. What's going to happen right around the corner, and it can trouble us. It can challenge us, and the big question is, how do we handle those things? How do we respond to those things? Well, there's an example that we find in the Old Testament that I think can help us with this, that can encourage us, that can remind us of the kind of faith and trust that we are to have in God, and that is the example of Habakkuk. And Habakkuk, if you turn there, or if you've read it or not, I encourage you to read it. We're not going to read the whole thing today, but to kind of just paraphrase, to sum up really what happens in the book of Habakkuk is some bad times for God's people are on the horizon, and Habakkuk knows that. Habakkuk can actually see the Babylonians and how the Babylonians are rising up, and they're big, bad, and scary. And Habakkuk comes to God. Habakkuk cries out to God, prays to God, Lord, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why aren't you doing anything? And the Lord's answer to Habakkuk is basically, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. What I'm going to tell you is going to happen is going to scare you to death. And so Habakkuk struggles with this. Habakkuk is afraid. Habakkuk is concerned. Habakkuk, wants an answer from God. The answer Habakkuk wants, which we all would want, is for God to just come and to get rid of the big, bad, and scary things that are going on, and to just make everything, peaceful and everything wonderful. But that wasn't the answer Habakkuk got from God. So you read that whole thing, and Habakkuk shares his thoughts and the Lord's response through the 3 chapters that make up the book of Habakkuk. But it's at the very end, after all is said and done, after Habakkuk gets answer from the Lord and he takes it to heart, and he expresses how this really troubles him and affects him. I want to notice what he says in conclusion to all of that. In Habakkuk chapter 3, starting in verse 17, Habakkuk says this: though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit beyond the vines, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls. What's he saying? What's he talking about? Habakkuk is describing the worst case scenario. He says, even if fig trees don't produce, the vines don't produce, the olive doesn't produce, the fields don't produce, the flocks are cut off and gone, Habakkuk says, even if everything goes really bad, even if the worst case scenario does happen, even if these things happen, he says, verse 18, here's his answer to it: yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength. He will make my feet like deer's feet, and he will make me walk on my high hills. Habakkuk says of all these troubling things that were coming, Habakkuk understands it now. Habakkuk is willing to accept whatever the Lord's will is. Habakkuk says, whatever happens, even if it's really, really bad, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will trust in the Lord. God is my strength. God is the God of my salvation. God will bless me. God will be with me. God will strengthen me, comfort me, and guide me. And so Habakkuk resolved within himself that no matter what was coming, he was going to rely on God. Folks, that is the kind of faith that we are to have. All of God's people are to have. Whether in our own personal lives, things that we're facing or things that will come, or whether it's the world around us and the things that are happening in our own country or in other parts of the world, whatever it may be, whether good or bad, even if it's a worst case scenario that does come to be. Let's have faith like Habakkuk. Let us rejoice in the Lord always. Trust in him. Lean on God for strength and for guidance, for comfort and salvation, knowing ultimately for us that our hope is in heaven with God. Even if this world falls apart and crashes and burns, which eventually it's, going to, our hope is in heaven with God. This world is not our home. We're just passing through anyway. Keep your eyes on God. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, as Paul said, I will say rejoice. God bless.